Hello, everyone. You're listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host for today, Tabetha Moreto. Our guest today is Lucas Litewka, Director of USC Clinical Trial Center. Lucas joined the University of Sunshine Coast in 2015 as the inaugural Director of the USC Clinical Trial Center. Today, we're going to talk about a very interesting new device, a new rapid detection device for Influenza A and B. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Lucas. I'm so glad you can join us today.
Thank you, Tabitha. Lovely to have me on the show.
Yes, you're welcome. So, Lucas, can you tell our audience who you are and what you do exactly?
Sure. So, my new role here at the university is really to take a greenfield opportunity, which is a clinical trial centre, and to attract clinical trial opportunities to our region and our community. And what that means is working with medical device companies, pharmaceutical and biotech companies to really attract those new and innovative treatments to our Sunshine Coast region. And what that involves is getting our doctors on the front foot to speak with the companies and try and coordinate a way that we can have these treatments available to us to present to our population, to our community, so they can have early access to new therapeutics that are in a clinical trial setting.
Wow, very interesting. Now, Lucas, please tell us about this new device that's supposed to detect influenza A and B more rapidly.
Sure. So we're very excited to be working with a Brisbane-based company called Illume. So this is a local Australian innovation. It's a rapid flu diagnostic device, and it not only has capabilities of detecting flu in less than 10 minutes, but it also has other capabilities to detect other communicable conditions. So, for instance, strep A is another capability. So with this point-of-care device, our doctors can literally take a nasal swab of a patient or an oral swab and quickly activate this device to analyze the sample at presentation of a patient. And within 10 minutes, it will tell us whether the patient has influenza A, influenza B, or they're negative to the flu. I think that's a significant leap forward for early detection of influenza in a clinical setting.
Wow, this sounds like an amazing device. Speaking of influenza, can you tell our audience what's the difference between influenza A and influenza B?
So there's various strains of influenza, and I think the important thing to note here is to being able to anticipate what type of flus are likely to come to our geographical area, simply because when we roll out different vaccine strategies throughout our community, we want to be able to identify and anticipate the type of flu strains that will be prevalent in the upcoming flu season. So being able to determine the different types and strains of flu allows us to then, prepare best with the vaccine techniques that we use to prevent the spread of flu. So the different strains of flu that can be present can be variations of influenza A and B and other types of influenza that can present itself. But it's important to differentiate the flu strains, and it's also important to know how to manage the various types of flu that present, and also know the type of techniques to manage, when people present when it's not the flu as well, so to prevent the unnecessary use of antibiotics.
Okay, thank you so much for explaining the difference between the two types of influenza. Now, speaking of influenza, can you tell us what are the causes of this?
The cause of influenza? Well, I think it's largely it's a transmissible disease. So it is easily spread throughout the community through close contact of individuals, and so the spread, if your population and your local cohort is not properly vaccinated, the spread can be quite prolific. And in 2017, our current rates of influenza spread across Australia, particularly in our part of Australia, Queensland, it's probably reaching record levels. So I think the recent stats have shown that we're close to breaking through the 70,000 positive flu presentations this year, and we still haven't reached the peak of the flu season. So I think it's quite disturbing to see such high rates of flu presenting in the community. And the result of that is people do experience pretty severe symptoms of flu, and those that are health compromised or have pre-existing chronic conditions may find themselves ending up in hospital and being admitted for prolonged periods of time just to manage, the complications of flu in addition to their pre-existing medical conditions.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Now, can you tell us, is there any available treatment for influenza?
Look, there are a number of treatments, and I guess if you do scan the literature, you'll find that the impact of these treatments for an average healthy individual may reduce the symptoms by a day or so, but where these treatments actually work to a greater extent are for those that are health compromised. So for young children and elderly population, these treatments do have a much more significant impact on improving, the symptoms and the complications of flu.
Yeah, I see. So speaking of children and elderly people, are there any other type of people who are at risk of getting influenza? It's really related to, your movements and activities, and if your job relies on you spending a lot of time with a great amount of people. For instance, if you work in a large organization, or you're working within schools or in busy public places, then you're actually more susceptible to getting the flu, based on the critical mass of people and the higher chance of passing on flu to those larger populations. I see. Interesting. Okay, now, so can you tell us, how can influenza be prevented?
Very simply, it's through vaccination. So particularly in Australia, we have a pretty strong campaign for people to get vaccinated. The initial recommendations and the government support is that they provide free vaccinations for young children and also the elderly, but I think there'll be a greater push for the coming flu season for next year to offer free immunization or free vaccination for the entire population, so we don't have the impact of a very big flu epidemic like we're experiencing at the moment. So vaccination and going to see your doctor, in the early stages of the flu season or even before the flu season hits is your best bet to avoid contracting the flu.
Very well said, Lucas. Now, can you tell us, is there any misconception regarding influenza or about this device that you want to clear up on the show today?
Not so much, but I guess it's important to emphasize that this device is going through clinical trial phases, so we can't make any assertions yet that this is going to be, the way clinical practice will determine whether someone's got the flu or not. So we're actually undertaking the research to prove that this device is as good, if not better, than the current gold standard, which is a laboratory test, which does take about 24 hours to get the result back. The other capability of this technology, which we'll be assessing, is a self-test, which would potentially allow an individual to go to their pharmacy or their chemist, purchase a device and assess themselves for the presence of flu. And further capabilities that the company is thinking of building in is a telehealth feature. So if you do perform the test on yourself and it determines that you have the flu, it should then be able to connect you to a physician, which will allow you to have a direct consultation and have guidance on what your next step should be, whether it should be to go home and remove yourself from spreading the flu to other people. And, you might even be able to a coordinator a medical certificate to allow you to take a few days off from work. And the benefit here is that you're actually changing behaviours, and people aren't going back into the workplace, aren't going back into school, aren't going back into crowded places where the chances of spreading the flu are greater and amplified each time.
Thank you so much, Lucas, for clearing up those misconceptions today. So, Lucas, I hope you don't mind. I want to ask you a personal question. So,
Sure.
Can you tell us, why are you so passionate about helping people with influenza?
Well, I think it goes even further than just influenza. For us, we see the benefits of doing clinical trials to enrich our community with what we think are contemporary steps of improving healthcare. So we see clinical trials fitting in well with right next to clinical practice. When you do research, it informs clinical practice. So that's why we feel like having access to clinical trials and improving the body of evidence around, different treatment methodologies or different therapeutics is important at improving the state of healthcare for us. So I'm passionate about accessing new treatments and making sure that our local community doesn't miss out on these clinical trial opportunities. And they may be something as simple as flu, but we're also interested in getting access to cancer treatments and treatments that are relevant to our population, which could mean, the type of chronic conditions that impact our local community in a significant way. So my passion is around really getting access to these novel and early treatments so our community can benefit and our health professionals feel like they're well equipped with good treatment options.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lucas. Now, what is your main takeaway message to all of our listeners out there?
Well, I think, this for us, not just here on the Sunshine Coast, but I guess globally, it's really sending a message to our population, our communities, that clinical trials, the only way we can actually make these great medical advances is if people show interest. They become aware of the importance of clinical trials, and when appropriate, that they show interest and participate in these trials. Without clinical trial participants, we can't do this important research, we can't make medical advances, and we can't get those medications to your treating doctors or to your pharmacies. So, the longer we take to develop these new treatments, the longer it takes to get important treatments and important breakthroughs in medicine. So I guess that my takeaway message is we always want to encourage people to show interest in clinical trials. And if that includes volunteering, then we're very welcoming of volunteers to our trials.
That was a fantastic message. So here's our final question. So how can we get in touch with you guys, especially at USC Clinical Trial Center?
Well, we've tried to simplify the way people make contact with us. So we've created a website. It's called joinourtrials.com. So if you go to www.joinourtrials.com, you'll be able to see what type of research is being conducted at the USC Clinical Trial Center and across our network of partner sites as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucas. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Really appreciate it, Tabetha. Thank you.
Everyone, that was Lucas Litewka, Director of USC Clinical Trial Center. We have just been talking about an amazing new device that helps the detection of influenza A and B more rapidly. We also talked about the causes of influenza and how to avoid getting it. If you like this interview, transcripts and archives are available at www.hpr.fm. We're also on all social media platforms, so don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. We're also on SoundCloud and iTunes for download. I'm Tabetha Moreto, and you're listening to Health Professional Radio.